So in this video, I want to make sure, especially as a product-based business, you are tackling some key specific things when it comes to understanding how to design your e-commerce website. Now, you probably would have seen previously my previous video talking about how to design a website in general, right? Well, now go ahead and watch that, but at the same time, also watch this because it will help to reinforce why I'm talking about key specific things when it comes to understanding how to design your e-commerce website, especially based off the back of your product-based business. Now, I wanted to do this separately because there's some key little nuances here that really are specific to product-based businesses. And at the same time, there's a lot of things that typical or the average product-based business won't even think about addressing when it comes to building their website or designing their website. Especially as an e-commerce brand, you've got to be thinking about key specific things and, more importantly, have one main key element always in mind when it comes to constructing your e-commerce website. So that being said, before we get stuck into this, I always want to make sure that you are liking and subscribing to this channel because I'm very aware of my views. Thank you so much for them. However, go that one step further and actually go ahead and subscribe. Now, when you subscribe, what you're doing is actually not only boosting the awareness of how it is that I help people, but more specifically, you're boosting the awareness and the understanding of branding. You're helping others to now understand that, you know what, the more that I support this cause and this mission, the more and more other people can actually understand the idea of branding, and people need to understand it because branding is one of the underestimated elements that could really start setting you apart from your competition. But not only that, it starts helping you to start getting recognized as you more specifically, but equally why you should be the go-to expert and not your competitor. So have a think about that and equally how it can actually apply to yourself. I share video content just like this. At the same time, I also share and make sure that the content that I put out there is short, sharp, and concise, all for the purpose of I want you to get it and I want you to understand it. And more importantly, I want you to action it as well. A lot of what I share on here is all actionable and it is all very much so doable. It's not unattainable. I deliberately make it short, sharp, and concise for the specific reason because I want you to go ahead and move forwards with it. Now, that being said, after you go ahead and like, subscribe to this channel, continue watching this video more specifically, but at the very end, I share some key principles that will actually make sure that you continue that momentum and keep pushing forwards with the lightness of your brand, but more specifically with the lightness as to how you can start building the awareness of what you've actually implemented on your website as well. So that being said, folks, let's get straight into this. So as I said, we are going to be talking about how to design your e-commerce website. Now, yes, obviously, this is a branding channel, right? So we're talking about your brand more specifically. That will always have to play a huge role within whatever the thing that you're designing, whether it be your website, your social media content, roller banners, anything printed. Your brand is always going to be the underlying aspect that runs all the way through to any of your assets, right? That being said, when it comes to your e-commerce website, I know I shared a few things when it comes to building a general website or designing a general website. But when it comes to your e-commerce website in specific, there's some key things that a lot of people, more so the average business owner in the product-based business, doesn't even consider. And I want to make sure that you specifically are actually considering these things. Whether you have an existing website or e-commerce website, versus whether you're just starting out or just starting to build it, or maybe even reaching out to a supplier who will help you to create it. Key things you always want to make sure that you have in mind, aside from your homepage, what I shared about in the previous video, and I'll share a link somewhere up here. Aside from your homepage, aside from your about page, aside from the how to or how it works process page, and the service page as well, slightly different when it comes to your e-commerce brand. Those are all key things to actually implement, and actually when it comes to your product-based business, the how it works process can literally be simplified in a different kind of way. But I'm going to come on to that in a minute, not right now. Let's start at the beginning. As the song says, let's start at the very beginning, right? When you start at the home page, your landing page, as you know, your above page fold which is literally the screenshot, the very first section that you see when somebody clicks on your link, whether it be through a Google search or by a way of another shareable link, right? When somebody lands on your landing page, your home page, that first section that they come to needs to be able to help them directly. What is the direct protocol that you want to make sure that your customer experiences? And by the way, I shared with you, there was one key thing that a lot of people tend to overlook, especially when it comes to their e-commerce brands and especially when it comes to their e-commerce website designs, right? And that's understanding the user experience and making it as short, sharp, and concise as possible. Very directive, but more specifically, focused. Now, what I'm talking about is when your customer lands on your page, what is the first thing that they see? If they are not seeing the type of products that you have, or understanding the collections that you have in play, or the different seasonal products that you have in your range, if they are not seeing that from the get-go, there's a high chance that they're going to start experiencing confusion. There's a high chance that their focus is going to be led elsewhere in comparison to where you actually want it to be directed to. Now, your header plays a huge role in this aspect, as it does on the general websites as well. But when it comes to your e-commerce brand, focus directly on what key things you want your user to go into. Focus directly, especially on the popularity of your collections or of your ranges that you have. So for example, if you have a fashion brand, if you have a fashion brand that is pertaining to men and women's ranges as well as kids wear, think specifically what range sells the most. Typically, it's going to be a women's range because 9 times out of 10, it's always women who are actually buying fashion, who are buying clothes, who are out there doing what they do, right? However, obviously, as we know, everybody's got some level of a fashion conscious mind, whether it be super into it versus like, yeah, I need something, but the need or the demand for it isn't quite great. That aside, you still need to make sure that you have clear-cut direct collections available so that your customer is not having to search through the reams and reams of items that you have within your stock, and so that your customer can just make a clear-cut directive move. If they're a woman, however they identify, they know that that specific range will be for them. That specific button, that specific section will be for them. Then, if you need to, do you need to create subsections as well? Do you need to have dresses? Do you not need to have trousers? Do you need to have skirts? Do you need to have tops? All these kind of things always need to be considered, but more specifically when it comes to having a direct, clear-cut sense of direction for your customer. That user experience, especially when it comes to an e-commerce brand, is super key and important to ensure that your customer stays where they are rather than loses interest and goes somewhere else. The other thing they also want to do and make sure of when it comes to key products as well is that how are they understanding how it fits in with their life? Are you even addressing that? Now, before I go in depth with that part, back to the homepage, you always want to make sure that you're bringing your customer in on your collection, in on your range, in on the season, whatever it may be, whatever your product is relating to of that moment, of that time. Involve your customer, get them in on the journey. Again, if you're a fashion brand, what's the collection inspired by? If you are a general product range business, a DIY range business, what are the key elements that you want to make sure that your customer pays attention to? Is it DIY season? Is it, that time for home improvements? Yes, now typically every year, every point of year is a home improvement year, but what key specific genre of time relates to your products? How can you make sure that you involve your customer into that product? And the reason why I get you to think about these things is because now you're also creating a level of relationship. A level of relationship that helps them to get it, and equally a level of relationship that helps them to understand how this now fits into my life. Remember that question I just asked you a little minute ago? I deliberately stopped it there because I want you to address it here. How do these products, how do these Collections, how do these ranges fit in with your customers' lives? Make it relatable, make it understandable. Key thing to always think about is always having your customer in mind, who exactly they are, not the general range of who they are, who specifically they are. And there's ways to be able to do this, and I'm going to share with you a really cool way to be able to understand exactly who they should be, even if you think they already know them. 9 times out of 10, there's a few things that you actually haven't thought about. But before we get into that, let's now talk about the user experience. You've got to be able to understand what that is in order to be able to understand this next part. Now, where I mentioned to you about the idea of splitting things into collections or splitting things into ranges, keeping the customer focused on the job at hand, which is to pick something that obviously they want to use and they want to have and wear and however the product may serve them, you want to make sure that they are keeping that direct motivational move. And here's what I mean by that. Make sure that their journey, their direction is focused in a way that makes sense to them. If, for example, we're going to go back to clothes again. If, for example, they're picking a top, great. What color top do they want? What kind of size are they looking for? What kind of feel do they actually want to experience? I'm saying these what kind ofs questions, or raising these what kind of questions, because you again need to get into your customer's mind. This is why it's super important to be able to understand who they are. When you understand who your customer is, you understand the type of questions that they're constantly going to be asking themselves, especially when it comes to either collections or ranges that you have on board. Where, regardless of what your product has, think about how is it that your product is serving this person. Because when you do that, you get to ask certain questions within your own mind that they would typically think of. Equally, if you are stuck on those particular questions, go ahead and ask them. Go ahead and ask them, what is it that you feel that they could really, really benefit from knowing? Go ahead and ask them equally, what is it that they feel that you're not necessarily addressing? And by the way, folks, you're an entity that is doing what you know, right? But when you know better, you do better. But you can only do better off the knowledge that you've been given. So you only know what you know right now. So get additional help from your customers, from those you are serving. What is it that they feel that they could really benefit from knowing? Here's why I'm saying all this. When it comes to your product page, key things that you always want to make sure you do, the basics at least. Have a size guide if it's relevant. Have a color range, again if it's relevant. Have what else is included within the range, again if it's relevant. Equally, also have a number of options that they can actually choose the quantity of, if it's relevant. If there's only one in stock, well, it's an elite item, obviously. However, if you have multiple items, at least have a quantity selection to be able to choose from.